Welcome to episode 2 of the Run Republic podcast with me, your host, Kev Groom. Our guest this week is ultra runner Emma Stuart. Emma only started running in 2018 and since then has become one of the top females in the ultra running scene. She's won some of the biggest races in Europe, including the 100-mile Arc of Attrition, the 100-mile Ultra-Trail Snowdonia and the 205-mile Tour de Geants. Last month she claimed a win in her first IMRA race at the Maurice Mullins 50k in Ireland, which also earned her a place on the Irish team for the European Athletics Off-Road Championships. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode and be sure to subscribe, share and let us know what you think. So let's get into this week's episode with ultra runner Emma Stuart.
Emma Stuart, welcome to the Run Republic podcast. Thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks very much. Yeah, glad to be on.
First of all, big congratulations on your 50k Maurice Mullins win. In running terms, you haven't been around that long.
Yeah, I suppose I haven't really. I wasn't very sporty at school. So I was always paddy last in all the sports races, sports day events. Never really understood why anybody would want to run for fun. So I did a bit of hill walking. I did some climbing when I was at university, but never really ventured into the world of running seriously, really, until about 2018, I think it was. I signed up for a half marathon on the Isle of Uist, which is where one of my friends lives. Went into that. I decided if I could run 21 kilometers before the race, I'd be grand during the race. So I set out. I was back home in Sligo a few weeks before the race. And I decided I was going to run 21 kilometers around the roads of Sligo. So I did that and I thought, sure, that's grand. No bother. I'll go and do that half marathon. So yeah, that was kind of the only training I really did for that. Did a couple of half marathons and then my partner decided he wanted to do some longer stuff. So he had done a few half marathons and a few road marathons, but nothing serious. But we went over to the Isle of Man and I did my first 50-kilometer race. So I kind of did 3 half marathons, 2 on the road, 1 on trail, and then I just jumped straight to the 50k distance. So to this day, I have still never done a road marathon. And I'm very proud of that. So I don't think I could do a road marathon. So did that. Again, hadn't really done a huge amount of training. I think the furthest I'd gone in training was about 20 miles in the Lake District. But did that, had an amazing day out. What a stunning route that is, like on the Isle of Man. You traverse the island from north to south, going across all the major peaks. And it is stunning. We got really lucky with the weather. And I finished that race as second lady, and I kind of was quite surprised at that. And I'd already kind of built up a fairly big season that year, kind of with I had another 50k race a couple of weeks later, and I ended up winning that. And I thought, hang on a minute, this is quite fun, and maybe I'm not that bad at this. So then I just kind of gradually progressed the distances and kind of really enjoy that kind of 100-mile distance. Is probably my favorite distance. And ironically, the Maurice Mullins 50k, that was the first 50-kilometer race I'd run since 2020. Everything between 2020 and now has been a lot more than 50 kilometers. So it was a bit of a shock to the system going back to that distance. Very pleasant, actually. Nice to know that you can be done in kind of just over 5 hours rather than 24 hours or 60 hours or 80 hours or whatever it is.
Of the races and distances you've done, that you'll never do a road marathon. You went from a half to an ultra, which is kind of unheard of.
Yeah, but the thing is, I suppose for me, running is not about getting a PB on the road. I don't enjoy that. I run because I enjoy the scenery. I enjoy being on the trails. I love trail running. Pushing myself with, big elevation, big distances. And you don't really get that on the road. The road is very much about what's your, given the perfect conditions, because, usually road runs are reasonably flat, etc. Given the perfect conditions, how fast can I go? Whereas for me, more of it is about, the variation in the terrain, the variation in the kind of the quality of the trails, the scenery, the views, things like that. There's so much more to it. So a road marathon just doesn't really tick the boxes for me. It's not really what I'm about. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to do one to see what could I do it in. But, it's not going to be a very impressive time at all by any stretch of the imagination. But it'd be good to say I've done one. But
So you also did I believe, a 60k ultra marathon during lockdown.
Oh, around my garden. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was due to go back. I really loved the Manx Mountain Marathon. Like I say, if you ever have a chance to go and do it, it is just brilliant. And I was supposed to go back the following Easter. It's over the Easter weekend. It's always every year. It's over the Easter weekend, and I was supposed to go back and do it again. And unfortunately, obviously, lockdown occurred. So on the day that I was supposed to do that 50k, I decided I was going to do 50k around my garden. But I got to 50k and I was still feeling pretty good. So I said, I'll go to 60k. So I did 60 kilometers around the garden. I cannot quite remember how many laps it was, but it was something like 680 laps of the garden. But yeah, it was actually a really fun day because the weather was quite good. My partner, he'd set up like aid stations and like a finish line and everything, and it was really fun. So yeah, it's I think it was it was actually really enjoyable. My feet got pretty sore from going the same way around the garden, and I had dug a path around the garden by the time I finished. But it was a good challenge. It was just something a bit different.
After kind of 2019, and you said you got a couple of good results, second lady. So I suppose did you realize yourself then that like you're onto something here? Was there anything special you were doing, or was it just like the races you turned up to? You felt good, the race went well, or was there any kind of specific training you were doing for these results that you were getting?
No, actually, I was very unstructured in my training up until kind of 18 months ago, I suppose. So I think, to some extent, luck and maybe a certain amount of stubbornness that kind of can lead you to achieve decent results without, I did, don't get me wrong, like I did run and I did train, but it wasn't any structure to it. But I think when you get to these distances over 50 kilometers, there's so much more to it than just physical fitness. So there's a lot of kind of looking after yourself, making sure you're eating enough, drinking enough, like staying hydrated, managing pain, managing the mental side of it. That means, you don't get me wrong, you need to be physically fit, but you don't need to be, an elite level of fitness to do well in a lot of these if you can manage the mental side of it. But certainly starting like a bit more structured training kind of, be about 18 months ago now, made a huge difference. Made a huge difference, probably more to the, what would you call it? The comfort level during a race. So, there was plenty of races before I started with some structured training where I ground it out. I was really struggling and, I would do well, but it wasn't pretty getting there. Whereas now with kind of that more structured training, I think I'm probably better able to manage myself because I am fitter as well, but better able to manage. And I suppose experience counts for a lot as well, but better able to manage myself. So I actually enjoy a lot of these challenges more now than I did. There was plenty of races I did where, the Lakeland 100, which is in the Lake District in England. I did that in 2022. And that was really miserable. That was probably the hardest race I've run to date, the worst race I've run to date. And I did finish it and I did a decent time and I was first lady, but I suffered for it's 105 miles and I suffered for about 80 of those miles. And that was probably one of my proudest finishes really, because wow, how many times I wanted to quit that race. And I was in a really bad way at the end of it. But it shows like if you put your mind to it, you can finish these things even when you think, crikey, I can't keep putting one foot in front of the other. But you still do. You still keep putting one foot in front of the other.
It's one of the interesting things about ultra running and the few that I have done, as you say, you can put people who have similar abilities together on the start line, but as you say, there's so many variables. There's nutrition, there's sleep deprivation, there's the weather conditions, there's the elevation. So it's kind of, if you run a road marathon, you're going to finish in a certain amount of time. There'll be people there with jellies and Jaffa cakes and cans of Coke on the way, but if you're running like the likes of a 100-mile race, you're you're on your own for 10, 15, 20 hours more, and it's a real battle kind of with yourself.
And that's the thing, a lot of road marathons, particularly the bigger ones, you're right. There's always somebody around you to pace you, or, just to, have a little chat with, or just to keep you going. But as you say, like, the fields get so spread out in these bigger races that you can go hours and hours and hours without seeing people. And I tend to end up in that situation in a lot of my races. Like, I am on my own, and it's managing those kind of thoughts and, the thought processes that go through your mind, and the negative thoughts. And, you've really got to manage those, because when you haven't got somebody to, encourage you or egg you on, or, that you can talk about how you feel with, it's just it's you and your brain. And, I mean, it's one of the reasons I like it, because you really get to know yourself, and you can really, dig deep. And I kind of enjoy that sort of mental aspect of it. I think Courtney Dauwalter calls it the pain cave. And yeah, I really enjoy that. But I know that plenty of people do struggle with that element of it. And it's something you have to train yourself for as well.
I suppose I would have a different experience kind of being towards the middle and the back. Like, even the Maurice Mullins 50K, I was passing people and asking them how many kids they have. Have you got a dog? Or it was all sort of chats. So I presume there's much less of that if you're, up the very top. Your first second when you're passing someone or they're passing you. Is there ever any kind of communication at all, or is everybody genuinely just head down in their own little pain cave, as you say?
Yeah, I think, don't get me wrong, like, I probably am not one, I don't find it that easy to talk to people if I'm racing hard. Don't get me wrong, like, if I'm, if I'm, enjoying myself and I'm out for a bit of a jolly, yeah, absolutely, I'll have a chat to people. But usually I kind of treat, I do kind of treat races as a bit of a job. Like, you got to get it done. So I really go into like a state of kind of hyper focus, and constantly, my brain's constantly going. I'm thinking about, how am I feeling now? What am I going to do at the next aid station? What's the next section? If I've recce'd the section, what's the next section going to be like? Where can I push hard? Where can I hold back a little bit? And things like that. So there's a lot going through my mind that makes it quite difficult to converse with people. And also sometimes, well, depending on the length of the race, like, I can be pushing quite hard. So it becomes quite hard to actually have a conversation. So yeah, I think from that point of view, no, I'm not the chattiest person in the world to talk to, but I know that there's plenty of people that do get, if you are towards the middle of the pack, like, striking up a conversation with somebody who's a similar pace to you is a fantastic way to pass the time, and it's like you say, you get to know people, and find out their story and what brought them there and why they do it, and I'm sure it's really nice finding out that aspect of it, that kind of community build behind a race.
I think there is kind of an understanding amongst all the runners in a race. I know for me anyway, I can kind of judge, well, I saw you coming back on the Maurice Mullins, and I just said, I'm not even going to say well done, because I know you look so focused. And I was, I said, oh, in my head, I was like, oh, there's Emma. But, the top end of the field, I was like, these guys and girls are, they're pushing hard. And I'm just going to...
It's funny, because the Maurice Mullins is the first out and back race I've ever done. And it was actually really nice, but also mentally quite exhausting in its own way, because, everybody is like saying, hi, well done, amazing job, etc. And I'm just like, I am dying. I don't have that extra, that extra little breath to respond. And I feel really bad, because these people are all like, amazing job, incredible, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't have the energy to say anything in return, So that was quite a new experience for me, but it was really nice. Like, yeah, seeing everybody come towards you, and there was always people around you in that race, which was really, really nice, actually. I was very appreciative of it all. I was very appreciative.
Yeah. Just going through some of your kind of victories then. I hope I'm pronouncing all these right. The Keswick 50K, Yorkshire Trod 50K, Lakeland 50, the Lap, the Montaigne Cheviot Goat, and another one there, the Lady Anne's Way.
Yeah, that was my first 100-miler. Yeah. I think that was my first 100-miler. That was a really good race, actually. I really enjoyed that race. Yeah, that was kind of where I realized, oh, I like this 100-mile distance. Yeah, that was cracking. Really enjoyed that. If I could do, I would love to have a go. So that was just under 100 miles. I think it was like 157 or 58 kilometers with only 4,000 meters of elevation, which is quite flat compared to what I normally do. And I was really happy with my time for my first 100-miler. So I'd love to have a go on a similarly flat race, a flat 100-miler now, to see whether I can come close to that time, because I think it was just over 19 and a half hours. I'd love to know, on that sort of flat 100-mile distance, what could I do now with a bit more experience and a bit more training under my belt. So yeah, that was a good one. I think that was 2022, wasn't it, that one? Yeah. So I've done a few more since then.
A few more wins in the 100-mile, the Arc of Attrition, and also in Snowdonia, and then a third place in Lavaredo.
Yeah, Arc of Attrition, that's an amazing 100-miler. That is really, one of the most beautiful in the UK, because obviously I live in the UK now, and growing up on in Sligo on the Atlantic coast, like that Atlantic coast is just absolutely stunning, and I don't think many coastlines come close to like the west of Ireland, but that section of Cornish coast path is, it's really reminiscent of the wild west, of it kind of reminds me of home, really. And for 100 miles you literally hug the Cornish coastline and you go right round the bottom of England, so right round by Land's End, and you're never more than probably 150 meters from the sea. So you just, I was out for kind of 21 and a half hours, and like you just hear the sea the whole time, and it was just, what an amazing race that was. I really loved that. So that's another one I would highly recommend. And then Ultra-Trail Snowdonia, wow, that's a tough race. That's a hard 100-miler. So that's a UTMB index race. So that's if you want to do UTMB, you need to enter a UTMB race, and UTS, Ultra-Trail Snowdonia, is the only one in the UK and Ireland. So there was a lot of Irish people on the start line there, which was really nice to see. So Ian Keith was there, and Billy Reid, and a few other good Irish ultra runners, it's pretty tough. It's 160 kilometers with, I think, just over 11,000 meters of elevation. But what makes it truly difficult is it's not like groomed trails. Like, it's quite rugged. There's a lot of although it's marked, like there's a lot of very vague paths. It was very difficult to follow the markers because it was really thick fog. A lot of it you're just following like sheep trods. So it's literally just trods that sheep have made on the mountains. And there's some really technical sections. So that was a real shock to the system, that. And it was quite funny because there was because of the UTMB race, there was a lot of Europeans that came over to tackle it. And what a shock they got. It has been deemed the hardest UTMB race in the world. So I'll take that. It's really tough. It took me, I can't even remember, was it 28 hours to do 100 miles? Which is really slow in the grand scheme of things, but it's just so hard. It is really hard.
You weren't satisfied with the 100-mile. Then you went and won the 205-mile Tour de Jeans.
Yeah, that's that was an experience. So it's a real jump up. Like going from 100 to 200 miles is it's a massive step up. Because suddenly you have to deal with sleep deprivation. So a lot of the 100-mile races, for me, I can do them in anything from kind of 20 to 30 hours, I suppose, depending on the terrain. but when you suddenly step up to that 200-mile distance, you're out there for minimum twice as long, usually a lot more than twice as long. And suddenly you've got to manage your sleep. And I didn't do that very well in Tour de Geants. I struggled to sleep at all for the first 2 nights. So I only got little bits of sleep here and there, and it really affected me mentally. It wasn't that I didn't want to sleep. I wanted to sleep. I just couldn't sleep. And that really affected, well, it probably affected my performance. It certainly affected me mentally. That was really, really difficult. I had some pretty harrowing experiences where, just as one example, because the race is so spread out, talking about being on your own, I was on my own for probably well over, probably nearly a day. I would say I was pretty much on my own for most of it. Maybe occasionally I would see people for a few minutes, but mostly on my own. And we got to this section where it's a huge long descent. It goes on for hours and hours. And I was really desperate for a sleep, but I didn't want to go to sleep because I had no alarm clock. So I had no way of guaranteeing that I was going to wake up within 5 or 10 minutes. So I couldn't sleep at the risk of falling asleep for too long. And these woods never changed. So I was running for what felt like hours and the scenery never changed. And I ended up, I kept looking at my watch because I had the route on my watch. And I never seemed to get any closer to my destination. So like it would say like roughly how far I had to go to the next point. And it just never seemed to get any like closer, just never did. So I ended up getting into this state where I fully believed I was asleep. So I believed I was in a dream. I was in a dream running in these woods and I wasn't getting any closer to my destination. I was just running on a treadmill in these woods. And I got really stressed because I was trying to wake up from this dream and I couldn't wake up from the dream. And it was really disorientating and very stressful. And the reason I couldn't wake up is because I was actually awake, but I'd fully led myself to believe I was asleep. And that was pretty frightening, to be honest, when you believe you're sleeping and you want to wake up and you can't. It's actually really, really frightening. And I stumbled along for, I don't know how long, but probably a couple of hours in this state until I eventually popped out into a town, but I actually went off course. So the course is really, really well waymarked, like really well waymarked. There's literally flags every 2 meters. I mean, it's incredible how they can mark it like that for 220 miles, but they do. But my brain just completely stopped registering the flags. So I just wandered off course, knew I was wrong, couldn't do anything about it, and then popped out at top of this town. And it's about 4 a.m. and I was just in such a delirious state. And I was like, I'm just going to keep going down. I just have to keep going downhill. So I keep running downhill. I'm running through this deserted town at 4 a.m, calling out, hello, is there anybody there? Like in this bazaar. And eventually I kept running down. And eventually I saw somebody sitting in a car. And it just brought me out of this state of, I don't know what you would call it, like, I don't know, sleepwalking almost. And suddenly I was lucid again. And it just was that whole state I had been in for several hours just suddenly evaporated when I finally found people again. Like I finally was like, I'm in reality. This is reality. And but yeah, it was a horrible experience when I was going through it. And I still think about it. And because I think when you're in that level of sleep deprivation, like you lose complete control of your mind. Like it does things that it's like your body disconnects from your brain. So like, for example, when I went off course and I could no longer see the flags, my brain knew that I was off course, but I could do absolutely nothing about it. Like I knew I was wrong, but I could not make my body turn around and go back and find where I had gone wrong. like, it's so weird how you just completely, the disconnect between your body and mind is just extreme in that level, when you're in that level of sleep deprivation. And I learned a lot from it. Like, I know exactly what I'll do the next time. But yeah, that was certainly a big learning curve for me. And I did that, you know, I was out for kind of just over 82 hours, and I only really had an hour and a half good quality sleep in that. And I think, you know, in retrospect, had I bagged myself an extra 2 or 3 hours, you know, I wouldn't have made so many mistakes. I probably would have been able to move faster, and I could have actually done a better time overall. So, you know, what I've learned from that is actually more sleep will actually equate to a better time, because you're better able to make decisions, you're better able to look after yourself, you know, you're able to move faster and things like that. So it was certainly an interesting experience. But I mean, again, it's an incredible route. I mean, the people on that, you know, the crews, the volunteers, everybody on that race is just so invested in it. And it's a really big event for the local people of the Aosta Valley. So everybody really gets behind it. And it is tremendous, like amazing experience. But yeah, mentally quite a challenge, really.
I was going to ask about hallucinations while running, but I think you pretty much explained it expertly there. I don't think there's any other
Yeah,
sport in the world that you get something like hallucinations and deprivation and, you know, all sorts of various scenarios. Like it is quite unique, isn't it, ultra running in that way?
yeah. So the hallucinations is an interesting thing, because I don't hallucinate like what some people describe. So like you know, I'm not going to see, like, I don't know, you know, somebody said that they saw, like, not in this race, but in a race they were doing, you know, they were going through the woods and they saw some dead pigs hanging from the tree. You know, I don't see things like that, but I see things. I know they're not hallucinations. They're my brain's interpretation of what they're seeing at the time. So, like, a common thing that I tend to get, or I certainly did during Tour de Geants, was you would see like a tree or a rock, like a giant rock formation, and you would think it was a house. And you'd be like, oh, there's a chalet just there. And then you'd get to it and you'd be like, oh no, it's just a tree or something like that. So it's like my brain interprets something different. But like, I haven't had like weird ones like animals in the walls or things like that. They're always very like believable. So like I say, it's like a tree. Oh, that's a house. Oh no, wait, no, it's just a giant rock or something like that. So mine aren't any like crazy, unbelievable ones. There is one thing on Tour de Géants, which to this day, I do not know if it was an hallucination in inverted commas or whether it was genuine. And I probably will never find out. But I was running down, I can't quite remember which village it was, but it was quite deep into the race because I was pretty tired. And we were running through the streets of this village, and there's this big chalet, like probably 3 or 4 story chalet that you run down, you run through the alley beside it. And in the top right-hand corner of the window on the top floor, try that again. In the top right window of the top floor, there was, I kid you not, a giant stuffed pink gorilla wearing a t-shirt. And I am 100% convinced that genuinely was a stuffed giant gorilla in the window. But there is a possibility that it wasn't. My brain has made it up. But I'll never know, because it is easily something that somebody could put in a window as a bit of a joke. Or no, it could be my brain has just completely imagined it. But I still maintain that there was a stuffed pink gorilla in the top window of that chalet, and nobody can tell me otherwise.
It sounds almost too specific to be real, but also too specific not to be real.
So if anybody listening to this podcast can confirm if there is a pink stuffed gorilla in a window of a chalet in some village somewhere in the Aosta Valley, and let me know if that's true, I would be really grateful.
Hopefully
Put my mind at
hopefully you can
ease.
solve the mystery one day. Let's talk about the Transgrancanaria Classic. Your third place finish there. Did you have any specific expectations going into the race? Like, were you looking at the fields? Were you looking at who was going to be turning up on the day? Obviously, a few very popular names on the day. How did you approach that race?
Yeah, I mean, the lineup on that was pretty frightening, really. And I was so honored to be stood there, in amongst, some of the greatest trail runners in the world. And I didn't really have any expectations. It's not really a race that plays to my strengths, because it's a lot of, the first kind of 50 miles is uphill, and then the last 30 miles is downhill. And my strength very much is downhill running. So I'm a very strong downhill runner. And 50 miles into a race, when you're suddenly presented with the downhills, it can be quite challenging to run strongly when you've already got 50 miles of elevation, kind of probably about 4,500 meters, 5,000 meters of elevation over the first 50 miles. And then suddenly, you're expected to kind of let loose on the descents, which go on for 30 miles essentially. My kind of plan was to try and be as conservative as possible, to try and, save my legs for the descents. I didn't really achieve that. My legs were completely shot by the time I got to the highest point of the race and then started the descents. They were in a very bad way. So I could not run downhill very well. And one of the other issues then, I probably, I was so pleased with third place. I mean, for me, getting third place in that race is just a dream come true. Like, I was so pleased. The race went pretty well. I didn't really have any stomach issues. The heat was okay. I did get very, very cold during the night. It actually was sleeting, really high winds, very heavy rain. The mud was crazy. It's weird mud. It's like really, really sticky. So it like sucks you in and slows you down. And so the first half was really challenging. And so, in general, the race went pretty well for me. But in retrospect, I think, Courtney is unbeatable, end of story. She's completely unbeatable. If she's, as long as she finishes that race, she's going to win it. The only way somebody else is going to win it is if she pulls out.
Did you get to see her speech much during before or after the race?
No, didn't see her. I briefly, I said hello on the start line because she was kind of like standing in front of me and to the right, and I said hello and good luck. But I didn't see her at all. She just went like a bullet from a gun as soon as the race set off. And then she didn't actually stay for the award ceremony the next day. So no, I didn't get to see her at all. And then Claudia is a super, super strong runner. But I probably, in retrospect, I think the only way I could have competed with Claudia was if I had set off harder. And I purposefully did not set off hard because I was trying to conserve my legs for the descent. So I ended up having this gap built up, which meant, that distance between me and Claudia was going to be too great for me to be able to close that gap without serious pushing, and probably at the expense of actually, blowing up and probably not finishing the race. So I think I was very happy with my performance. And like I say, I think the only way I could have done better was to go out harder. And I wasn't prepared to take that risk and go out hard, because for me, the number one priority was always going to be to finish the race. So this is the problem. And you'll see this at the high level races, people go out really hard and then there's a very, very high DNF rate. And I'm not quite willing to do that just yet. I'd always rather finish a race than, go out really, really hard and blow up, and have a miserable day. So it was good. It was a fantastic experience. So it's a cracking race, but it's tough. It's a really tough race as well. It's so technical. Well, it's not technical like hands and feet technical. It's just there's no smooth running. So like even the descents are really cobbly, they're really severe on your feet, they're really steep. And the ascents are just never ending. So it's a really tough race, but stunning. Yeah, really beautiful. When the sun comes up and you can see Roca Nublo, and it's a beautiful race. Really is stunning.
You mentioned the weather conditions there and the high winds, which kind of leads me on to the Maurice Mullins 50K, which I don't think I've ever experienced winds that tough. Not even in a race, just in day to day. And I've been in Ireland all my life.
It's funny because I thought the winds on Maurice Mullins were pretty bad, but then I've just done a race last weekend which made the Maurice Mullins look like a gentle breeze. It was pretty extreme wind last weekend. But Maurice Mullins, yeah, wow, that wind was pretty fun. I'm not a fan of boardwalks at the best of times. The boardwalks, I don't know what it is, because you're not even that elevated. But as soon as you get onto the boardwalks, you're literally, it's like a washing machine. It's just like you just get battered about. So yeah, the final descent back into from Joust back to the start, or back to the finish, was pretty extreme. It was that was pretty fun. I didn't know whether to stay on the boardwalks or to run through the bog. And I decided staying on the boardwalks was probably going to be better, but I must have been blown off them about 10 times. But the bog to the side of the boardwalks was horrific. So I was like, well, I'll probably still be able to move faster on the boardwalks, even if I am going to probably like fly off them into the next county. But yeah, that was it was fun to have. But what extremes of weather. It was crazy. When I rocked up to the start line and the hail came down, and I was absolutely frozen. I was like, what am I doing here? What is this place? Because I've never raced in Ireland before, actually. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a miserable day out. And then we got to the car park at Crone Woods, and then the sun came out and it was absolutely beautiful. And I was like, this is amazing. And had this incredible weather all the way to the turnaround point and back to Crone Wood. And then the weather turned again. And at least it wasn't raining. But yeah, going back up Joust, what weather. Wow, that wind was pretty extreme. Yeah. But fun.
Yep.
It's a fun route. I have to admit. The trails on that Wicklow Way are so much more pleasant than most of the trails I train on back in England. It's such lovely running, like just so runnable, and like they're really good quality as well. I was genuinely surprised. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did it back in 2020, so 4 years ago now, and it was kind of during lockdown, so it was actually only 44k on the day because it didn't have Joust or Mauldin. You literally went around Joust and then straight down the power court, and then so I rocked up at the Maurice Mullins thinking, okay, I did it in 6.5 hours last time, so if we get under that today, I'll be happy. But as soon as I went up those boardwalks to Joust and was literally blown off, and then ended up getting blown off into a bog on the descent, as you mentioned, like I thought, okay, that's enough boardwalks for me. But yeah, it's just an insane race. Did you have any kind of specific strategy for that one on the day, given that it was your first IMRA race, your first one over here?
Yeah, no, I don't know really. I was trying to work out, because obviously it's a qualifying race for the European Off-Road Championships, which is why I was doing it, because I wanted to qualify. And I was very concerned about the qualifying time cutoff. I thought 5.5 hours, 2,600 meters of elevation and 52 kilometers. This is going to be a tough time to beat. So I knew that it was going to be pretty hard. So I knew I was kind of going to have to go out hard. It was either go hard or go home, because I thought, if I don't, I might not be able to get that qualifying time. And actually, yeah, it worked out really well. I had a really good race. Again, I was a bit worried because I haven't run 50 kilometers in 4 years nearly. So I really had no idea whether I would have the speed to do a 50k race. So yeah, no, it was good. I think what helped a lot was like the quality of the trail. So like it is, it's not a super, yes, I know there's a lot of elevation, there's a lot of hills, but it's not super technical. So there are some really good sections where I could build up like a decent amount of speed because I'm a strong downhill runner. So like, the first descent down into it's Balnastoe, down through Balnastoe Woods, like that descent down there, you can get a good bit of time under your belt. And the forestry roads, kind of from Crone Woods to the turnaround point, again, it's for me, that is almost like road running, because that's not what I'm used to running on at all. Like those forestry tracks to me are as good as a road. One thing I would say is like Circa, who is a tremendous road runner. Wow, she was so strong on those uphills and those forestry roads, and that really that made me push really, really hard, because she was a lot faster than me on those uphill sections. So I knew that I was going to have to push much harder on the technical sections to try and get away from her. Because like I say, I'm not used to running on those kind of like gradients, those forestry road gradients. I find them quite a tough gradient for me to run on. So but equally the reverse is, it's a really nice gradient to run down. So luckily there is quite a lot of that in there. So I kind of knew probably from the halfway point that I had a good chance of getting that qualifying time, if I could just maintain my pace. And that was really all I kind of was focusing on. Like I didn't, obviously was wanting kind of a podium, but as long as my main goal was actually to get under that 5.5 hours, because I thought it was a very tough benchmark, and it was a tough qualifying time. So I was really pleased to be kind of well within it. So that was a good, I think that's I hope it's a good marker for where my fitness is at the moment. Although the 60-kilometer race in Annecy for the European Off-Road Championships looks pretty tough. Very tough. So yeah, lots of tree routes and technical sections.
The likes of the Maurice Mullins there, like you're unfamiliar with a bit of the terrain. So you mentioned that you're quite good on the downhill. So do you have a specific strategy, or do you just take it mile by mile? Or I suppose the advantage of an out and back is you know what's coming on the way back.
Yeah. Again, I went into the Maurice Mullins blind, so kind of everything I kind of knew about it was just kind of what I could glean from looking at the Garmin, the climbs and descents, like how long each climb is, how many meters each climb is, trying to visualize it as best I could, because that's really all I had on it. But downhill running, it's just always something I've really enjoyed. I'm very lucky. I live in a very kind of hilly part of Britain, with some very technical technical trail running. So I kind of get used to it. I mean, the only way you can get better at downhill running is to practice it and to learn to switch off. So I think it's just years of training, I suppose, on the downhills and getting confident. I think the reason people slow down on the downhills is because of confidence. But if you can increase your footwork, your speed, the speed of your cadence on the downhills, and your confidence in your kind of where your center of gravity is, confidence in your shoes, I think that makes a huge difference. And for me, most of my races, I fully believe most of them are won on the downhills, because actually uphill running, especially over these longer distances, is different over the short stuff. But over the longer stuff, it's quite efficient to walk up, but it's not that efficient to run up, because you exert a lot more energy. So the speed or the time difference between somebody who's running up a hill versus somebody who's walking up a hill is not actually that big. Whereas if you've got somebody who's very strong running downhill, you can actually make a huge gap very, very quickly if you're confident on the downhill. So I think, yeah, for anybody, I suppose, any trail runner who's, how can I get faster? I certainly think working on your downhill running technique makes a huge, huge difference. Being efficient on the downhill.
You mentioned confidence in footwear. After the Maurice Mullins, I've very little confidence in my Hoka Speedgoats. Coming down Joust after I fell 3 times, so I'll have to reevaluate my footwear for the next race.
Was that the far side of Joust before Mullen, or the other way?
Yeah.
A lot of people fell over there. So the trick with that is stick to the heather and the tussocks. I didn't go into that ice rink or whatever you want to call it. That was horrific. I was watching everybody fall around me. No, don't go. No footwear is good on that. Just stick to the heather and the tussocks on the side. You're far better off, because you could have the unless you've got, I don't know, crampons. You're not staying upright on that sort of stuff. It was pretty bad. It was I fell over once, but yeah, there was plenty of people around me who fell over a lot.
Yeah, I went into the header after the first couple of falls. I said, okay, this is getting a bit ridiculous. But those people, like,
to be fair, I have to thank I can't remember which of the guys it was who gave me a lift. Oh, I've forgotten his name now. He was from Sligo as well. He had actually warned me about that descent off Joust, and I was so grateful to him when I came across it. He had said to me, stick to the heather. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, this must be the section he's talking about. And I was like, I felt like a winner right then and there. I was like, that is the best piece of advice anybody has ever given me in a race ever. Stick to the heather coming off Joust.
Yeah, for anybody listening, if we're doing the Maurice Mullins next year, stick to the header. I wanted to ask, you've done like the list of races I've read out there, like it's kind of like a bucket list of races, but is there any race that if you had, say, all expenses paid, flights guaranteed entry, that you could just be on the start line? Is there any race or any one race that you would pick to?
Oh, the Barkley Marathons, of course. Do you know what? It used to be Western States. That was on my bucket list. But having seen Jasmine's performance, and I know Jasmine, she's an incredible person. Having seen Jasmine's performance this year, it's lit a fire under me that it is possible. A woman can do it. It's certainly been an inspiration for me to really try and do it. And I think, like, I've wanted to do it for a while, but like I say, the number one priority race before this was Western States. But actually, no, for me now it's the Barclays. That's just incredible. Yeah.
And you have an interesting connection to Jasmine, I believe.
Oh, Jasmine, yeah. So Jasmine is also a vet. I'm a vet. Jasmine was one of my tutors, lecturers at university many, many years ago. It's probably it'll be 10 years. Yeah, it'll be 10 years ago now. 10 years ago that she used to teach me at university briefly. Because she's a small animal clinician. And I don't think anybody in my year knew what a talented person she was. She never, we didn't know that she was a runner. We didn't know that she was an incredible runner, a fell runner. So it was only probably when she did the spine race, which I think was 2019, that was kind of the first time where I was like, hang on a minute, I know that woman. That's Jasmine. She taught me at university. So, and then she probably, she wouldn't have remembered me because there would have been hundreds of students going through during her time as a resident. But I went out to crew Nikki Spinks at the Barclays last year, so 2023. And she was over there obviously as well for her second attempt. And that was kind of the first time I actually kind of properly met her again, like post-university. I don't think she'd remembered me at all. But yeah, that was the first time like getting to properly know her really as a person and as an athlete. And she's I met her at the running show in January. Running show is like a massive expo in Birmingham every January. And I bumped into her there. And I just said to her, are you going back to the Barclays? Because she'd initially said, after last year, she had said the weather was so perfect last year that she didn't think she would be able to do a better performance because the weather was probably not going to be as good. So I wasn't sure if she was going back, and I bumped into her in January and she was like, no, I'm going back. And I could see the fire in her eyes. I could see that she was determined to do it. Like I kind of knew when I saw her there and then, I thought she's actually going to do it. And fortunately, we thought the weather last year was perfect, but it was really, really cold. So the water bottles froze overnight. A lot of the water sources froze. But this year, the weather was even more perfect. So it wasn't cold. It was maybe a little bit too hot during the day, but it wasn't cold. And, you know, when you combine, one of the things that makes Barclays so difficult is the weather. But when it can all align and the weather is good, and you've got Jasmine, who's obviously, it was her third time doing it. And also the fact there was a huge number of very, very, very strong runners there, a large number of previous finishers who were all working together to try and defeat this race. You know, you've got just a perfect concoction for a finish from the first woman, and it was just, yeah, everything just aligned, and I'm so happy for her, because yeah, Jasmine is someone who can prove that if you want something badly enough, you can do it. You know, you can absolutely do it, and she really wanted that.
Yeah, it's such a unique race, and I think it was great to see Jasmine's achievement, and also it kind of captured everyone's attention worldwide. So I think that's amazing to see, as you say. Just before we wrap up, what's your big plans for the rest of 2024? What's on the calendar?
Yeah, so, well, hopefully wearing an Irish vest. I'd love to hopefully wear the Irish vest at the Euros. That is going to be a really hard race. But anyway, as long as I wear the vest, sure, that's the main thing, and I have a good time. So yeah, that's kind of probably the next big thing. I do have a race between now and then, but it's more of a kind of a low-key, you know, it's not very commercial, low-key race. It's not that far from where I live. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. And then we'll have to see how things go after the Euros, whether I do Lavaredo again. So I did Lavaredo last year. I wasn't happy with my performance. It was a pretty dire race. I felt like death for the whole thing. And I'd like to go back with a bit more specific training under my belt, because it's a very runnable race, and I'd been training for UTS, which is not a runnable race. And basically I couldn't run. I was just, all I could do was hike. So I'd like to go back to Lavaredo, but we'll just see how I feel after the Euros, because that's going to be a pretty tough race. And then I am signed up to UTMB, so we shall see if I can toe the line on that. But yeah, I've already seen the lineup for UTMB, and it's scary, and I don't like scary things. There are a lot of very, 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 very strong world-class athletes doing that event. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. That could be a race where I blow up. That is a race where you go hard, you go home. Most people will blow up, and if you don't blow up, you'll do all right. So
well, we'll be looking on interest to see how you get on UTMB, and of course for during the European Championships with the Irish vest next month. I could probably sit in here and talk for hours and hours about all your races, all your experiences, all your tips, all your information about all these ultra races. It's just fascinating to speak to someone like yourself. So, Emma Stuart, thanks very much for coming on and taking the time to speak to us today.
Thanks very much. Really enjoyed it. Cheers.
That's all for this week's episode of the Run Republic podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave us a review on whichever platform you're listening on. Make sure to follow Run Republic on all of our social media channels, and check out runrepublic.com for all the latest running content. Thank you for listening, and until the next time, keep on running.